I want to quickly bring in both Vivan and Jaijit on the third question, and I'll come to Tehseen for number 4 and 5. Jaijit, does it smack of a populist budget today? An election year populist budget?
So populism would have been if you're targeting vote banks. So let's say you say that certain schemes are for only Brahmins or only OBC or only whatever Thakurs, then that's a populist scheme. If you're saying that I'm going to give food to the vulnerable sections of the society and therefore I'm going to put 2 trillion rupees to provide food, that is not populism. That's supporting the vulnerable sections. So I don't see in this budget a populist move per se. Now, if you're supporting certain segments and certain industries, then for sure you're benefiting somebody.
Okay.
But that is
okay.
not.
So overall mutate on populism. Jaijit Bhattacharya, okay, we have no clue. Everything, including government, guesses that if we are building these many kilometers of road, we are probably generating these many jobs. So we have no clue. But are we 10 million jobs a month is heck of a figure.
So I think the term jobs is not what we are really looking for. I think the term we should use is income generation capabilities.
Fair enough.
So, and there are multiple ways to generate income. The last time I did a deep dive on it, which is about 7-8 years back, or in around 2016, there were enormous number of jobs. In fact, precisely 7 lakh jobs created only by Uber and Ola and Uber. And by that extension, there will be a large number of gig workers getting created. The problem is when you do a survey and you knock on the door and you ask, do you have jobs in this household? The answer will be yes. Will be sorry, no, because they will say that we don't have a job, but we are having an income. But that is not the question that was asked, and therefore the answer that comes is also incorrect. And so there is a problem with data for sure.
Okay.
And therefore we do need to look at other ways of collecting the data.
Can Indians themselves reimagine themselves as Vishwa Gurus? Dr. Bhattacharya, let me begin with you. Are we seeing more than just the shoots, but the foundations of structural pivots in our economy, sir?
I think clearly there is no dispute that there are fundamental changes and foundational changes that are happening. Let's look at the data points so that, it's a data-driven conversation rather than just a perception-driven conversation. We have doubled our per capita in the last 7 to 8 years. We're now at $2,500 US dollars per person. And that number, the moment any country crosses $2,000 per person as per capita, the growth rate accelerates. And if nothing else is done wrongly, then the country is on a fast path to become an upper middle income country. And that's where we are reaching. If you look at, let's say, the inflation rate, in spite of the pandemic and all the other challenges that happened last year, by December 2022, which is last month, we were back to less than 6% inflation. We were at around 5.7% inflation. So I can go on rattling these figures, and we are clearly on a path of growth, which is based on fundamental changes. Now, if you look at today's budget as an example, a lot of the focus was on future industries. For example, even when the budget is talking about agriculture, it is trying to push the agriculture into the next generation of farming, which is growing millets instead of the high water consuming wheat and so on. And millets is indigenous to India. And it's also supposed to be a super cereal, which has a huge export market. Similarly, it's pushing agriculture into chemical-free pesticides, chemical-free fertilizer in a very graded manner. And that's the future of industry. Similarly, it's pushing the entire supply chain of energy into green, be it green hydrogen, and therefore it's also coming out with 50 hydrogen trains. So it's not just saying, let's produce hydrogen without any consumption. There is a structured thinking of changing the entire supply chain of energy and consumption of energy so that we move towards green. Similarly, there is focus on not just consumption, but even the capital goods required for green. The manufacturing of solar, manufacturing of 4 gigawatt hour of battery, which is what was mentioned in today's budget. These are all very fundamental structural changes that are being introduced with the signaling and incentivization that is coming through the budget. And as you rightly said, budget is not just a one event in the year. Now there is constant policy making coming in, but budget plays a very important role in signaling.
Yes.
And the clear signals that are coming out is that we would like to bet on the future industry. We will promote what is happening right now, but more importantly, we'll promote and bet on the future industry and guide the economy and the industry towards a future industry.
Okay. Jaijit Bhattacharya, my last question. Now, as I sit here, I've done this now for long enough. Alok Mehta has been doing it since before I was born. Okay. But if we were to meet, a bureau chief of, New York Times who's won a couple of Pulitzer Prizes, or, somebody from BBC who's joined Huawei, okay, they would be, paragons of our industry simply because, they work and live in London and New York, and, they know better. And people like us who've devoted our life to the profession, and Alok ji will point out, this is not a get-rich-quick scheme. He doesn't drive around in a Jaguar. He didn't do this profession, to make millions. You have to perform it as a service. Similarly, there will be people who run think tanks, but if they are, working out of Washington, New York, they are just somehow better. Can we have self-belief and move away from ghar ki murgi dal barabar, that Rome and Paris is better than, better places to visit? Foreigners know better. Their journalism is better. Their everything is better. Can we have self-belief? Is it possible?
I think clearly, yes. This is something that I've been championing for a long time, and I'm very heartened to notice that the new generation actually comes back and says, "Hey, I don't need a certification from some Singapore think tank, as Hindle was mentioning. They can have their own views. That doesn't mean that I have to be constrained by those views or I have to be certified by those views. We are 16% of the global population. Our views are our views." Now, you had mentioned the term Hindu nationalistic, government that we have and so on, which is repeatedly used in any reference in any of the New York Post or Washington Post, New York Times, Washington Post newspapers, or anywhere in Europe. And clearly, we all can look back and see that none of those governments are referred to as Christian nationalistic governments. Now, clearly, we are nationalistic. I'm happy to note that we have a nationalistic government, but it is not on a religious bias. And that doesn't mean that minorities are not getting impacted in this country. I mean, if you look at Jammu and Kashmir, there were minorities who were persecuted and they had to leave in 89, 90. So in various pockets, various minorities do get impacted. And that's the same in US. You see the blacks are getting shot by the police for no particular reason. Just because they have jumped a traffic light, they are punched and killed. So those that will happen in a population.
So I'm just going to take a small pause for the